Okay, we're going to talk about areas today. It is 9-1 and 9-2 in your book, so you can follow along by looking at that. Trying to adjust this to make sure we can see everything. Looks like I have it not centered. There we go. Okay, so we're looking at 9-1. 9-1 is about area. Okay, what does area mean? We talk about area of a house, area of a country, area of property, area of a window, square foot. Everything as in area is measured in squares. Okay, so whenever we talk about area, we are measuring how many squares fit inside. Now, the size of these squares change depending on what your unit is. So if I'm talking about something small, and I could use a square that's an inch by an inch, then we are talking about how many, when we're talking about area, we're saying how many inch by inch squares fit inside the figure. Okay, so that's really what we're asking is how many squares? That's why it's called square inches. Or we go inches with a little squared sign. Both of these are the same thing, but we're really saying how many inch by inch squares fit inside. Or if we have something that's a foot, I'm not sure how long a foot is, but I could approximately. Okay, we're looking at a foot by a foot square. So when we're talking about area of a house or a room, we're talking about how many square feet. So this is a square foot. Square, it's a square shape. It's the length of a foot on each side. Okay, so this is where it's a foot on each side. So if I'm asking how many square feet are in there, I'm asking for how many of these, it's actually a little larger than that, but how many of these square feet would fit inside? Okay, when we start talking about bigger things, we start talking about how many square miles. So when we talk about a state or something like that, it's a square mile. Now I can't draw a square mile because it's a big area. You have to think of it's a mile by a mile big. That's what we start talking about is how many of those squares that are a mile by a mile fit inside the shape. So again, area is always how many squares. How many squares? Go ahead, are inside, I'm recording, the figure. Okay, so it just really depends on what size your unit is. And so that's what we're looking at here. Okay. We can a lot of times measure triangles in them. We can break things into different sizes, but we're really just trying to find out how many are in there. And so when we're looking at these, we're just trying to see what is the size of that inside. Okay, so when you start on the first one, we're looking at when we're talking about the regions inside of a polygon, we can usually break those regions apart and find the different sizes by splitting it into different portions. So like if you think about if I have something like this, I can break this into two parts, okay? And so I can find the area of this part and I can add it to the area of the rectangle. So we can break it the area of the triangle. So we stop and we can break things apart, find their areas by breaking them into different shapes. That makes it easier for us to calculate, okay? So that's something what we will do in this section. Usually any polygonal region, remember the polygonal region is something that is not concave, is convex, it goes out. It is something that is got straight lines, so we can usually at least break it into triangles. And so there is a postulate, it's called the area postulate, that basically says that you can break all polygons into triangle regions, and if you break them into triangle regions, then you can find the area of that polygon by breaking it into those triangular reasons, or regions. Okay, so that's really what 9.1 is all about. It's really just defining what is area and then going through and looking at that area. Okay, when we get to 9.2, now we're going to talk about how to find the area of a square or a rectangle, which you guys should have figured this out already. You should know how to do this already. It's not something new. We're looking at the area of a square and the area of a rectangle. Now, since a square is a rectangle, I can actually use the rectangular formula for squares. Okay, we'll just see why it's a little bit different. So if I have a rectangle, which remember has 4 right angles, opposite sides are the same length. So we can call it different ways, but this is usually called the length, this is called the width. Our area, because we're going to look at how many little square inches or whatever, if this is inches by inches, then we can just multiply. So basically, if you're thinking about something like this, and it's like 1, 2, 3, we'll make that a little bit shorter, so that there's 4 inches that way. So we can draw our little scales here, and then I go down here, and I have these, and go all the way across. Okay, and then I go by this. I know these are not perfect, but I'm trying to just give you the idea. So basically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 7 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 4 inches. Notice if I wanted to count those all up, it would be 28 squares. Squares that are the size of 1 inch by 1 inch. Okay, we call that 28 inches square because we're saying it is a square. It's the size of 1 inch by 1 inch. So this just tells me it's a square, and this says the size of the square. And that's really why we say inches squared, because we are measuring with inches squared inside of there. Okay, so that's what we're actually looking at, is how many of those little squares, 1 inch by 1 inch, are inside that figure. That's what we're finding when we are looking for area. That's why area is always something squared, because we're always looking at something that's a square, and that's how we measure it. It's not like just a ruler. It is an actual square, and we're looking how many squares fit inside there. This tells me the size of the square. The square is 1 inch by 1 inch. Okay, so in a square up here, which kind of sounds funny, just remember that the length and the width are equal. So the length is equal to the width. So what we do is we take this formula, length times width, and we just say, oh, they're the same, so the area is going to actually be the width squared, or area is going to be the length squared, because length and width are the same. Usually what they say is area is equal to the side squared, where S is the side of the square. Okay. Now, if my square is just an inch by inch, obviously there's only one in there. Okay. But if my square is bigger than an inch by an inch, and I'm trying to do it kind of by inches, my approximation is probably off if you were to measure this, but it's an approximation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches this way. This would have to be 6 inches also for it to be a square. We go 1, 2, 3. Oh, these are not going to be the same size. 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to make my square littler. So I didn't draw them exactly the same. So it's 6 by 6. Notice that each side is 6 inches, but I'm going to get a total of 36 little squares that are an inch size. So I write inches squared because it's 36 squares of inch by inch inside. And so that's the key to finding area, and that's why we always put a squared on that. Okay, so really, this is your basic idea of area, and the key thing I'm trying to help you understand is we always measure area in the side, how many little squares of whatever we're measuring the width of fit inside. Okay, it can be square miles if you're measuring country. Okay, it can be square feet if you're measuring how much you have in the house. It can be square yards if you're measuring different things like concrete or stuff outside. When we talk about the size of a yard outside, we will take about square yards instead of square feet. So that's just a yard by a yard. And that, how many squares that are a yard, 3 feet long by 3 feet long, fit inside of your front lawn or your back lawn or whatever that is. Okay, so that's really all that we're looking at for area. So take some time, look through this. The main thing I'm trying to get you to understand really again is area is how many squares, and that's why area will always have a squared on its unit. It will always have an inches squared, a feet squared, a yard squared, something squared. It's always gotten by multiplying at least 2 dimensions together. 2 dimensions. It's very simple. In a rectangle, we know it's the length times the width. In a square, the length and width are the same, so it's just, again, the same formula, but we can make it into S squared. A lot of times you'll see that. I don't think you have to memorize a square different than a rectangle because really a square is a rectangle. It's just sides are the same. Okay, so that's what you're looking at for this. So we'll hopefully go through some more tomorrow. We'll talk about how those are fixed together tomorrow.